Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Beth Doyle. I'm the manager of health and wellness at Always Health Partners. And thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. Today, we'll be learning some healthy ways to eat during the holidays to help us enjoy some comfort food without overindulging in too many things that aren't healthy and learning some new recipes. I'd like to introduce our presenter. Our presenter today is Valerie Machinist, assisted by Ashley Toohey. And Valerie leads the nutrition department at Community Servings. Always Health Partners has had a relationship with Community Servings for 5 years since we began our Your Care Circle program back in June of 2016. And Community Servings has really been an invaluable resource and intervention for some of our most medically complex members. Community Servings provides medically tailored meals made from scratch to help improve healthy outcomes, especially where nutrition impacts disease process. Valerie has been at Community Servings for about 3 years now, but she has over 20 years experience as a registered dietitian and a health educator in a variety of corporate and public settings. She has a master's degree in nutrition and public health from Columbia University, and she specializes in managing chronic diseases, weight management, and sports and exercise nutrition. She's passionate about healthy cooking and believes that food provides so much more than just nourishment. One note before we get started, I just like to tell folks that Always Health Partners does not endorse any particular diet or style of eating. And if you have any questions or concerns about what's healthier for you, please speak with your provider. And now here is Valerie, and let me pass this over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. And thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Valerie. I'm the manager of nutrition here at Community Servings, and this is Ashley. She is a dietetic intern with us. So she has been helping me behind the scenes and is here to help today. And I'm so excited about this because we are talking today about healthy comfort foods to help combat holiday overindulgence. And I think you can eat healthy comfort foods really any time of year to combat any kind of overindulgence. But the holidays, as many of you know, can be a particularly hard time for a variety of reasons. Either you're eating a lot of foods that you normally wouldn't eat because they're available in your workplace. I know the last 2 years have been a little strange in that way, so holiday celebrations don't look quite the same as they did a few years ago. But also, I think the holidays can just be stressful in general, and sometimes people use food as a way to comfort themselves. But there is a healthy way to eat, and I'm hoping that the recipes I show you how to make today are going to be something that you add to your regular rotation of foods that you prepare, because they're super comforting, they're super healthy and nourishing, and I love eating them. I make them all the time. So what I am going to start with is a homemade whole wheat bread. And I wanted to do this today because I think baking yeast bread is intimidating to a lot of people. I know it was to me for a really long time. And I was one of those stereotypical people that once COVID hit, I was like, well, may as well try bread baking because I have a lot more time at home. So I did. And I now bake this bread pretty much every week. I love doing it from scratch because I know everything that's going into it. There's no preservatives. And I find it just fun and soothing, frankly. And there's something about baking bread from scratch that just feels good to me and comforting. So I'm going to get this bread in the oven and then show you a little bit of how I got it to this point, because I want to make sure it bakes while we have time today. It'll probably, our ovens here are pretty powerful. They're a little more powerful than a standard home oven. So it'll probably bake in like 30 to 40 minutes. If you're doing this at home, you need probably 45 to 50 minutes. So what I have here is, what I have here is bread that has rested since last night. So I mixed all the ingredients together before I went to bed last night. It rose overnight. I turned it out onto this sheet of parchment paper about an hour ago and just let it rest for a few more minutes. And now I'm going to put it in the oven. And this recipe is called No Knead whole wheat bread. And this is the beauty of this recipe, is you don't have to knead it. I think that's what always stressed me out about yeast bread baking was kneading. and when I do it right, when I know when it was done, you don't need to knead this bread. So it's been resting. You can see it has like a little bit of spring to it. If time permitted, I would have let this rest for maybe another hour, but it's still going to turn out beautiful. So what I have done is I have here a Dutch oven, which is just a heavy cast, like enamel coated cast iron pot. You can use any heavy pot, but really any pot will do. The reason this works so well for this recipe is it actually gives the bread some shape since you're not kneading it very much. Usually when you knead a yeast bread, it holds shape a little better because you're going to. With this one, it needs a little structure to bake. So I heated my oven to 450 degrees with this pot in it. So the pot is piping hot. You want to be very careful when you do this. And I am going to take this bread on the parchment paper, put it right in here, and I'm going to cover it. And I'm going to bake it in your home oven. You would bake it covered for 30 minutes. I'm going to do it for about 20 here because I think that's all it's going to need, but we'll check it and see how it's doing. So this is going to go back in the oven at 450 degrees for about 20 minutes. All right. The way you get to that, and I did like a little mini bread this morning, just because I realized I wanted to show how this looked, is you basically mix flour, yeast, salt, and warm water together in a bowl and walk away from it and let it sit for 8 hours. And at least 8 hours overnight is fine too. When I say it is that easy, it is truly that easy. That's the beauty of this. So this was, I mixed together, like I said, flour in this recipe calls for 3 3/4 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, a teaspoon of yeast, and then 2 cups of like lukewarm tap water. I just run it under, like run my faucet until it gets warm. You mix it together with a spoon. It's going to look like a shaggy mess. And then you cover it with plastic wrap and walk away until about an hour before you're ready to bake. At that point, you're going to put your pot in the oven and heat it up. You're going to take a piece of parchment paper and put some all-purpose flour out on it. You're going to take this and turn it out on it. I'm going to use kind of lightly floured hands. You can knead it once or twice if you want. You're going to shape it into a ball. And then I usually use the plastic wrap that I had the bowl covered with. And you cover it, and again, you walk away, and when that oven is ready to go, you do the steps that I just did, and it is that simple. This is like the foolproof piece bread recipe, and there's just something super gratifying to me about baking your own bread. You know, it's comforting. I did 100% whole wheat flour because I'm sure you all know there's lots of health benefits to eating whole grains. They fill you up a little more. The thing with baking 100% whole wheat bread is that it's going to be a denser loaf. It tastes really good. It's going to have a lovely nutty flavor. But you could also do this 50-50 white flour and whole wheat flour. You can also use white whole wheat flour, which is a little bit lighter as well. You can mix it up and experiment and see what works with you. But I wanted to include bread. I think a lot of people don't think of bread as healthy, but when you're balancing your intake throughout the day, some good whole wheat bread can be so satisfying and it can be part of a healthy diet. So hopefully I've convinced a few of you to try bread baking at home. It's not as scary as I always thought it was. And now I've done tons of different breads, like even breads that we need, but this is still my go-to recipe. I bake this every Sunday night and we have bread for the week. The one thing to note about home-baked bread, if you don't do this, is that it does not keep as long as the store-bought stuff. Like it will go stale, and if it's humid or warm out, it will get moldy. So you just have to keep an eye on it because it doesn't have any preservatives in it, so it doesn't keep it warm. So with that, we are going to get started on our shakshuka.
Oh, Valerie, can I step in with one question?
Yes.
Can my homemade bread be frozen?
Yes, absolutely. You can bake the bread and then let it cool. You want to let it cool completely and then stick it in the freezer whole or slice it and then freeze it. So if you just want 1 or 2 slices, you can take them out, and you're going to want to toast them up because they're not going to be like, they're going to be a little soggy after they defrost, but toast them up and they will be lovely.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Before we started today, Ashley and I were talking. She was telling me how her sister at home has become a sourdough bread baker, which is a whole other like world to get into. I could speak to you for hours about sourdough bread baking. It takes a lot of extra time and some TLC, but it's super fun to do. And I'm happy to answer questions about that as well if anyone has them.
Thank you.
But our main recipe today is shakshuka. And this is like a Middle Eastern, North African dish traditionally. The thing I love about this is it's a hearty and comforting and warm in the winter, but it's also a great like spring and summer dish. And it is an amazing vehicle to use up literally any vegetables that you need to use up in your refrigerator. So this is like endlessly customizable and super simple. It's basically a tomato and vegetable base that you're going to make, and then you crack eggs in it and cook those eggs in that base, and then you have this wonderful dish. So with that, what we're going to start with is I have about 2 tablespoons of oil in my frying pan. You just need a good heavy frying pan. It can be non-stick. This one is not non-stick. You could use a cast iron skillet for this. And I have about a half of a medium onion. So I'm going to just get the heat started on this. And to this, we're gonna cook the onion, and then we're gonna add all kinds of vegetables and tomatoes, and let that cook up and let the flavors blend for a little bit. In this case today, we're using zucchini and some bell pepper, and you could literally throw anything into this. It would be good. You could use any squash that you have, any color bell pepper. I've thrown spinach in, like if I have spinach that needs to be used. Eggplant would be good in it. Truly anything that's about to go south in your kitchen, you can put in this. And that's something that we always love talking about here is how to not waste food and make the most of what you have. And this is a great way to do it. What I may have Ashley do while we're chatting, while I'm showing you a couple of things, if you don't mind, I may have you cut up some avocados if you are able to do that as a topping. I love avocado on top of my shakshuka, so I'm going to help her do that. So just another second to heat up. You could also serve this dish for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I often actually make it for dinner because unless I'm making, but I don't even know if I've ever made it for breakfast at home because I'm always on the run with my kids. But I make this for dinner all the time. It's a super easy, fast dinner that you feel good about eating afterwards. So this was, again, a half of a diced onion, and I'm just going to let this cook up and get a little golden brown in the pan. And while that happens, I am going to cut up a bell pepper. We have a zucchini just cut into these half moons. And I'm going to cut up a bell pepper. And for those of you who are intimidated by bell peppers, the easiest thing to do is just cut basically 4 sides off of it. This is washed already. And then you can just cut it into strips or dice it, whatever you want. knife is not super sharp today for some reason. So again, just going to cook up this onion until it's golden brown. It will only take a minute. You know, one of the things about the holidays that I felt like was a statistic that has always been thrown around is that the average American tends to gain, you know, a couple of pounds over the holidays every year. And I've never been able to verify that. I was actually trying to see if that is like a legit statistic or just something like the people on the news like to say to everyone. But I do think it's certainly possible for all sorts of reasons to overindulge over the holidays, eat more than you normally would. And, you know, the important thing always is to just find some balance. You know, there's generally more sweets here that around this time of year than maybe is normally. You know, I know, for example, we're going to do a cookie swap here at community servings among the staff on Friday, and I'm sure I will consume more cookies than I ever would in a regular day. But the key is, again, balance. You know, I'll take it easy the rest of the day. I'll make sure in terms of like I won't have dessert after dinner or something like that. I'll make sure I get a little extra exercise over the next couple of days just to make myself feel a little better about the overindulgence. So my onions are nice and translucent and starting to get a little brown. What I'm going to do is toss in my pepper. And zucchini. Let that cook for just a moment. Just going to let those get a tiny bit softened. And then I am going to add 2 cans of diced tomatoes. And what I was able to find was, and this is not always easy to find, especially right now, with some of the weird supply chain issues that I'm sure many of you are seeing turn up in the grocery stores, is I was able to find no salt added diced tomatoes. And that is ideally what you want to add to this. Diced tomatoes, canned tomato products in general have a lot of sodium in them. And anytime you're able to cut back on added salt in foods, I think it's a good choice. Now, it doesn't mean we're not going to add salt to this, but when you use things like no salt added diced tomatoes or canned tomatoes or broths or things like that, you can control what you put back into the dish. So it'll be, the flavor will probably be a little more balanced in the end, but you're also just doing yourself a better service by not adding the extra salt when you don't need to. Now, that said, it is really hard to find all the products that you might want right now. So these are nice and softened. I'm going to add my diced tomatoes. Mix those up. And then I am going to add a 6-ounce can of tomato paste. And this is going to give this like some thickness and like a rich tomato flavor. I could not find no salt added tomato paste. So it is regular tomato paste for this, which is fine. Now, usually, like I find myself making recipes that never use an entire can of tomato paste. This one happens to, which is nice. But if you ever find yourself doing that, and you didn't know this, you can take whatever's left of that tomato paste, put it in like a freezer storage bag and stick it in your freezer and just break off chunks as you need it. anytime you're cooking. It lasts for at least 6 months in your freezer. I'm sure I have some in my freezer that's been in there for like over a year. I'll probably still use it.
Valerie, we were just having a little trouble hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Where did I cut out?
I heard you say freezing the tomato paste.
Yes, so you can freeze the tomato paste,
Mm-hmm.
and it should last in your freezer for at least 6 months. And probably what I mumbled, because it's my like embarrassing secret, is that I probably have bags of tomato paste in my freezer that are like more than a year old, and I will still use it because as long as it's not freezer burned and looks and smells fine, it's okay to use.
Okay, thank you. Helpful.
Sure. My freezer's like a black hole because I hate wasting food. So every now and again, I go through it and try to use up everything in there, whether it's like tomato paste or broth or like meals leftovers that I have frozen. But I have to make a point of doing it because it truly is like a black hole. All right, so now what I'm going to add to this is the seasoning. I have here a half a teaspoon of cumin, a half a teaspoon of paprika, a half a teaspoon of chili powder, a quarter teaspoon of garlic powder, and then some kosher salt and black pepper, about a half a teaspoon each. So I pre-measured those out, and I am just going to put them all in here. And if you don't like one of these spices in particular, you can leave it out, swap it out for something different. I think this gives it like a nice earthy chili flavor. Something else you could do that I have done with this dish is instead of using 2 cans of diced tomatoes, you can use a can of diced tomatoes and then a jar of salsa, like bottled salsa, and then you'll get like a nice, almost like a nice Mexican flavor from it. And then you don't have to measure out all the spices. It actually makes it very simple. All right, so we're gonna let this cook. I'm just checking the time. There's just a couple minutes left on my bread. I'm gonna go check it in a moment and see how it's doing. Ashley very kindly diced up some avocado for me, which will be a lovely topping on this. Just let this go for a minute, and I'm gonna go back over to the oven and check on the bread. Again, this is very hot, so you always want to be careful when you're handling it. Oh, that looks beautiful. All right, so you could see it's like not super hard and done yet, but what I'm going to do is uncover this and put it back in the oven for about 10 minutes. And when our shakshuka is done, our bread should be done. So it's back in the Phillies.
The shakshuka is looking delicious there.
It smells so good. I wish you all could smell this. So what I'm going to do next, this is kind of the final piece of this, is I'm going to the best of my ability, make like 4 little nests they're going to in here with my spatula. It's not working super well, but I am going to crack 4 eggs into this, and they are going to almost poach in this. And if you don't like eggs, honestly, you could serve this with some whole grains on the side, like rice or farro, and it would be delicious too. My husband does not like eggs, so sometimes what I do is I will make this and do a couple eggs for me, and then cut up some pre-cooked chicken sausage and stir it in at the end. And so it's like half egg for me, half chicken sausage for him. again, super versatile dish.
Very nice. And I have to admit, I'm not as good at cracking eggs. I would not have the confidence to crack them directly into the dish. So I have to do a bowl first.
That was not super clean. I aspire to be one of those people who can crack an egg and like with like one-handed, basically, like you see all the chefs on TV. I have not gotten there yet. I'm just gonna rinse my hands off. Are you able to do that? No. I wish I was that good. But so this is just going to take a couple of more minutes to cook up. And you can cover it to make it go a little faster and also just poke the egg whites a little. I'm going to go grab a cover. So hang on one moment. I forgot to grab a cover and they're unavailable. So what we're going to do is improvise. And I'm just taking another pan and I'm going to put it upside down and let those eggs cook a little faster.
Right.
What I wanted to say about the bread baking is, especially if you're a novice bread baker, something that I never knew until I started doing this is one way to know if your bread is actually done is to take the internal temperature. It's funny. I'm an avid cook. I take temperatures on meat all the time, meat and fish whenever I cook it, but I never thought of it on bread. And if you use an instant wheat thermometer, you want the internal temperature to be about 190 degrees. I'm more confident in my bread baking skills now, so I can more or less tell when it's done. But if you're not, you can use a thermometer and know that your bread is pretty much done.
Great. That's really good to know. I didn't even think of that. Never thought to that. And I have a question just in general while we're waiting for that to cook. How can I sort of prepare for eating success if I'm going to a big family gathering? Are there things I can do ahead of time to sort of set myself up to eat well as opposed to overindulging or not making the best choices?
Yes, that's a really good question. So anytime you're going to a gathering, the first rule of thumb is don't go hungry. So don't show up at a family gathering or any kind of party or gathering when you're absolutely starving. That's just going to set you up to overeat. And that kind of is good, like a good general rule in life is if you allow yourself to get to the point where you're absolutely starving, you're never going to make the best choice. An example is I'm always hungry at the end of the day. And I always bring a snack for myself to eat on my way home from work. I have about a 40-minute drive. So I always bring like an apple or some vegetables or something to eat in the car, because if I don't, when I get home, I'm ready to eat my countertop. I'm so hungry and I'm never going to make a good choice. And I'm going to like start eating snacks and junk that I don't really want to eat. So anytime you're going to a party or gathering, you should kind of think about that and not go hungry. Have a snack beforehand. It may seem counterintuitive, but have like an apple and peanut butter or some pretzels or celery and hummus. Something that's light-ish, but is going to take the edge off any hunger. The second thing is to go, knowing that you don't need to eat everything that's out. Pick and choose the things that you want to eat that you enjoy. I know it's hard, especially if you're gathering with family. You haven't seen them in a while at this point. Maybe some of them have special dishes or they get offended if you don't eat everything that they make. Those are family dynamics and they can be hard to navigate. So either choose to not eat everything or just take little portions of everything and have a bite. The third thing is to watch your alcohol intake. If your alcohol can contribute a lot of calories anytime, but especially over the holidays, like if you're at a party and it's festive and you're drinking, it's going to contribute to calorie intake. And it also kind of lowers your ability to make good food choices. So a good rule of thumb is to, if you have an alcoholic drink, alternate with some water or something that's not alcoholic, and keep yourself hydrated and allow yourself to make some good choices.
Thank you. Good advice.
That was a good question. It's hard to do, and these are cooking slower than I would have thought they would, but still looking delicious.
Great.
We're gonna let them poach for another minute, and we're gonna check on our bread in a little bit.
Okay. And then I have another question for you when you're ready. So I hear both that I see nuts at holiday parties all the time, and I hear both that nuts are healthy and that nuts are high in calories. What can you tell us about nuts?
That's a really good question, and both of those statements are true. Nuts are really healthy for you. They're a source of really healthy monounsaturated fats. They're filling, they have fiber. They're a great source of vegetarian protein, but they also have a lot of calories. A quarter cup of nuts can have about 200 calories. So the thing to think about with nuts is to watch your intake. Like, don't park yourself next to a bowl of mixed nuts and just mindlessly eat them. Because that bowl, like a bowl about this size full of mixed nuts, can have about 800 calories in it.
Okay.
So maybe fine for some people. And if it's a one-off thing, like fine. But if you're looking to watch your intake, that may be more calories from nuts than you want to consume. So like stick to about a quarter cup of nuts. I don't have a quarter cup measure here, but like a small handful. The other thing to watch out for is like the salt and sugar on like candied nuts, things like that. Just be mindful. If you eat nuts at home, get plain dry roasted or like lightly salted nuts. If you're out at a party, just watch the total amount that you eat. They can be really filling. So, focus on, like, your best bet is to take a cocktail napkin, put the amount you want to eat in it, eat those, and then be done with it, if that makes sense.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, let me go back to my bread, and then I think we will probably, the shakshuka should be done too in a few minutes. That's beautiful. This smells so good here. If any of you have ever baked bread, it's nice and crisp on the outside. It just smells like a pile of deliciousness. So what I'm going to do is very carefully, if it doesn't totally rip, operating totally with me. Take this out. The other thing that's really nice about baking this in parchment is it keeps your pot pretty clean and it doesn't stick. It did stick a little to parchment, but that's okay. That'll be easy to peel off when it cools. All right, I'm going to move this over to my other cutting board, which is clean. Just show you the inside of this. Normally you'd want to let this cool for a little bit before you cut into it, if you can wait. But here we have this beautiful bread. It is pretty dense, like I said, because we used all whole wheat flour. But if you did this with white flour or 50-50 mix, it would have risen a little more and you'd see like a more open crumb texture in it. But I love dense, like hearty bread, so this is cool with me. And then finally, we have this beautiful dish, which I believe is done. The eggs are cooked and solid. You want to make sure your egg whites get nice and cooked. The yolks are probably still a little runny, which is how I like it, but that's totally up to you and how you like your eggs. So that's it. Let me serve a plate of this up so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to put a few pieces of avocado on that. And then I also love this with a little bit of feta cheese on it. Again, totally optional. I think it just adds like a nice little flavor to it.
Wow. This looks fantastic. I wish I was there to smell it and try it.
I know. I wish you were here to eat this. But hopefully we've showed you that this, like it's pretty simple. I mean, we did a little bit of prep beforehand, certainly with the bread, but this was a pretty complete, simple, healthy meal that came together in like 35 minutes. And this is great for serving a crowd, for leftovers. I mean, I could have cracked like 2 more eggs in this and it would be a complete meal for 6 people, especially with the bread. So it's easy to cook healthy. And I think this is just the kind of thing a lot of people are looking for after having a heavy meal. The holidays, hopefully this year, many of you are able to gather safely with family and friends and loved ones who you've been separated from for the last 18 months or so. And, certainly many celebrations are full of delicious food, but sometimes that food can be really heavy. And this is like the perfect meal to kind of combat that or offset like a heavy dinner or lunch or something like that. I'm happy to answer other questions as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I know we've had some questions throughout. If anybody's got any additional questions, please use the Q&A or even the chat and put those in. We'll see here. We have one question about alcohol that came in a little bit earlier when we were talking, which is, are there some alcoholic beverages that are less calorie laden than others?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're watching your calorie intake, so let me back up. First of all, if you don't drink, you don't need to start drinking. I kind of always like to put that out there. I do not think alcohol is necessary for any kind of celebration. So I don't want this to be construed as if I'm promoting drinking alcohol. But if you do drink and you want to watch your calorie intake, I think beer and wine are your best bets from a calorie perspective. They're lighter. I feel like you can watch your intake a little more. The glasses can be a little smaller, or you can control how much wine you pour into a glass. When you start getting into the hard alcohols and mixed drinks, especially, the calories just go up because you're looking at per ounce of hard alcohol, you're looking at roughly 100 calories, but then plus any mixers you put into that. So like whether it's soda, juices, things like that. So it's not to say that you shouldn't or can't have those, but just you should be mindful that they do have more calories than just straight beer and wine. I know some people who like to cut their wine with a little bit of seltzer to make a spritzer. I know for many people that's like blasphemy, but you can also have, like, if you do want like some kind of mixed drink, you can take vodka or gin and mix it with soda water and a squeeze of lime, and that's like a nice light drink. So those are ways to think about that. But again, if you don't drink, don't start, and I don't mean to be promoting it, but
of course,
I think a reality is a lot of people do enjoy a cocktail, and those are the best ways calorie-wise to manage it.
Thank you. And I will share, I am not a medical expert, but the general recommendation is that for health is that women should have no more than 1 alcoholic drink per day, and men should have no more than 2, and absolutely not saving them up for drinking all at one time.
Yeah,
so
it
moderation.
It doesn't work that way. Like you don't like not drink for 6 days and then have like 6 drinks in one day. That's never recommended, but those are the recommendations for just general health.
Right. And we have a question coming in, which is, what about desserts? Things that are lower in sugar, lower in calories, maybe have some redeeming nutritional value to them. Are there some things that we should look for to prepare or indulge in when we're out?
So, good question. I think dessert is something that you should consider eating in moderation. You can always share with someone. I'm a little bit of a believer in if you're going to have dessert, have dessert.
Mhm.
But, certainly there are richer desserts than others. Like, if you think about things like cheesecakes and very dense cakes and things piled high with whipped cream and frosting, all things that are super delicious and I love. Don't get me wrong. So the way I always think about dessert is have a little bit, have like cut yourself a piece or serve yourself a portion smaller than you think you might want, and you might be surprised by how satisfied you are eating a smaller portion of it. Certainly fruit-based desserts can be a little bit lighter, but they can also have a lot of sugar in them. So, dessert can be tricky. I think like sorbet can be very light and refreshing if you're eating a lot of heavy food. Meringues, things like whipped up from egg whites, can be very light and refreshing. And of course, just straight up fresh fruit is always a good choice.
Wonderful. Thank
But
you.
everything in moderation.
Very good. Thank you very much. All righty. Well, thank you again, Valerie. Thank you, Ashley, for helping out here. Um, Food looks fantastic. I definitely have some new things to try baking, and I know that I will be providing the recipes to everybody after the close of the session. Um, I hope everyone will take a few minutes. We're going to be sending out a 3-question evaluation. So please take a moment and fill that out. And when you get, you'll also be getting a copy of the recording, and feel free to share that with your friends and colleagues. And again, we'll be sending out the recipes. So from Valerie, Ashley, from me, and all of us at Always Health Partners, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day and be well. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.